Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Don, and I wanted to make a quick response video to the verdict that Miss Guyger received in the murder of Mr. Jean. So for those of you who don't know, in September 2018, a white ex-cop in Dallas, Texas, murdered a black man that was unarmed in his own apartment. She thought it was hers, but it was not. He lived on a completely different floor from her. She murdered him. And so there is a huge outrage. People are upset about the 10-year sentence. It's a slap in the face. It has people scared. It has people sad. And I want to talk a little bit about that and why that is. I'm not really here to say what's right, what's wrong. I'm here to just provide some context. The first one, in terms of forgiveness, no one has the right to judge anyone's forgiveness. If the brother and the family wants to forgive her, that's fine. That's okay. I have no problem with that, and we should not either. We should not condemn that. I think what is being condemned is this notion of minimal consequences and repercussions. If you look at the history, you look at the context, black people are disproportionately sentenced. We are sentenced harsher. We are viewed as more guilty. There's research that shows that white people are viewed as more innocent. They are convicted less, or they are convicted less harshly. So when you think about that and you think about the disproportions, there raises a question of equity and of inequality. So you have to be wise about that. So I don't think that the argument is necessarily about forgiveness. It's about consequences. It's important to point out in the call to attention to the effects of white emotionalism and its impact. Some people are calling it white women tears, and looking at that history. I mean, when you look at the history of white women, there's a history of white women lying on black men, and black men falsely, being falsely accused, being wrongfully convicted, and wrongfully sentenced. There's a history of black men being murdered as a result of white women lying. So you have to look at the history, and I think for me, I want to bring a call to attention to that fact. I think another thing that's worth bringing a call to action would be looking at our law. Our law is very flawed. There's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of room for subjectiveness, and there's a lot of room for inequality. I mean, she could have been sentenced to life, all the way to as little as 2 years, and she received 10. I'm still going to count that as little. That's little for taking a life. The other concern I want to bring up is she's a trained cop. When you look at the history of cops, we have a history of black people, black men in particular, but black women too, and black non-binary folks being murdered by cops disproportionately. And so when you look at the history and you think about the training of a cop, they're trained to de-escalate a situation. They're trained to unarm individuals. They're trained to protect and serve. So if anyone could have de-escalated the situation without murder, it's a cop. I beg to ask, what about Mr. Jean's actions made you decide that his life had to end? What about his actions made you decide that his life had to end with him eating ice cream in his underwear, watching TV in his home? That's traumatizing. That someone could knock on my door and kill me for being in my home. It sounds dramatic, but it's not. That's literally what happened to him. I just need to know the thought process, because it doesn't sound like there was any critical thinking and reasoning, that there were any deductive reasoning, that there was any form of intelligence used. The only other option that I'm left to question is whether or not this was a hate crime, whether or not she responded out of hate. There is a history of there is a history of cops hating, white cops hating black people, killing black people, being prejudiced, being discriminatory. Was this that? I'm left to ask that question. And I think it's a valid question. You could have called the cops. You could have called your landlord. You could have double-checked the room number. You could have double-checked so many things that you just didn't. I don't think a text from your boyfriend, because they really prettied that up. They said something like romantic lover, life partner. Like, even the language used to talk about her is innocent, and I think that goes back to the dangers of the white sympathy. I think that's why there's like this uproar and this outrage. When I look at the situation, it's alarming. I think we need to look at our laws. We need to get more specific and get stricter. We need to be intentional about the messages that we send out. Small comment regarding the Christianity part. I think it's important to note that, you know, many Christians believe that, and I shouldn't say many Christians. I mean, I'm a Christian, and, you know, we are taught to forgive. You know, God cannot forgive us unless we forgive. And we're also taught not to judge, and we're also taught not to seek out vengeance. I think there's even division within the black community, black Christians and black non-believers, or black believers who may not be in an organized religion. Give my 2 cents. Long story short, I'm going to say that no, we shouldn't judge. So we shouldn't be calling him stupid. We shouldn't be calling him a coon. We shouldn't be calling him an Uncle Tom. Like, he's none of those things. He's the brother who forgave the lady. He's a guy who's choosing to heal. He's a guy who's choosing to love the unlovable, which is what God's called us to do. We should forgive. He forgave. We should forgive. But forgiveness does not mean pardoning. Like, you still did the crime. So I think in terms of seeking vengeance, no, we can't seek vengeance. I don't seek vengeance. And I think that's my only message to everyone. With that said, like I said, our laws need to be changed. They need to be more streamlined, detailed, standardized, so it can be a continuum. Advocacy is not a form of vengeance, in my opinion. So you know, trying to make legislative change, you advocating for that, that's not a problem. I don't think that's a problem as a believer. What would be a problem is, like, if you were one of the bystanders out there and you decided, oh, I'm going to shoot this lady, I'm going to kill her since she killed him. That's vengeance. That's not okay. Like, we can't do that. Some people were saying she needs to be jumped. That's vengeance. We can't do that. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in America. We need to think about, you know, the police department needs to really think about who are they protecting and serving. Our court system needs to think about that. Our legislation needs to think about that. And our country needs to think about that. Because we are not viewed as humans still. Our lives are not valued still. We are still viewed as more guilty, dangerous, unworthy, less than. You know, if you're white and you're happy that she only got 10 years, ask yourself why. That's my question. Like, people were cheering outside. Why? Is it because it was a black person? And they don't really matter? We don't really matter? Because white people don't deserve that? Thanks so much for watching. Until I see you next time. be you, be great.